Welcome to Biblical Insights with Bob. We're continuing our study of the Beatitudes this evening, and we're ready for the fifth Beatitude, which I call the Bliss of Mercy. So, the fifth Beatitude says, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." Now, again, as we've done before, we first need to define mercy. Now, in the Hebrew, in Jesus' time, the Jewish people considered mercy in two ways. First of all, it was like a pardon for a transgression or forgiveness. The second was more positive. The pardon for transgression was kind of a negative side, but on the positive side, it was giving alms. It was giving to the poor. It was contributing. So there was two sides of mercy. We've kind of narrowed it to forgiveness for doing wrong. Sort of, I won't punish you if you won't punish me. This Beatitude is there's kind of a turning point here from the first three. It deals on a horizontal plane, dealing with other people. The first three had to do with our relationship to God. Now we're talking about dealing with other people. So note the quality of mercy. Now the definition of mercy in the lexicon in the Hebrew is chesed. Now that's an Old Testament word in the Hebrew, but it's always translated loving kindness. So 9 out of 10 references in the Old Testament, I think there's like 400 of them, but 9 out of 10 or 90% refer to God and His acts, His mercy. In Psalms 136, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but in all 26 verses, they include the words, His loving kindness is everlasting. His chesed is everlasting. And in Micah, chapter 6, verse 8, he says, He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and that word there is chesed, which is mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And then in the New Testament, Luke 6:36 says, Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. So there's a quality there. It's a divine quality, but it's an active quality. More than pity or tears, more than a feeling. It's kind of the Hebrew indicates it's kind of an ability to kind of get inside the person's skin, to think the way he thinks, to see with his eyes, to feel with his feeling. It's to really understand what they're going through. You see, that's what God did in Jesus Christ. It's sympathy or to hurt with. Jesus did more than weep, you see, more than feel sorry for. He died to save us. That's mercy, folks. That's the ultimate mercy. That's the ultimate chesed. He died to save us. It's not a quality that we can develop. It's a God-given quality. It comes out of a pure heart, out of a heart of love. That's where it's at. In other words, none of us can measure up to this other than through a Spirit-filled life. It's a God-given quality. We need to remember that. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Now let's look at some of the actions of mercy. The merciful are kindly in their judgment. Now, let's look at that for a second. They're kindly in their judgment. Mercy is not characterized by a critical spirit. We're able to see with the other's eyes. In other words, if one's religion makes him harsh and stern, unsympathetic, he'd missed the Christ-like quality that always goes with a Christ-filled, Christ-controlled life. That's a quote by Randall Denny. If your religion makes you hard, stern, unsympathetic. Now, I hate to say this, but if you look at Facebook, you find a lot of Christian criticism. And yet Jesus said, "Blessed are the merciful." And I think of another story that I've been studying about Jesus eating with the publicans after he called Matthew. And he was criticized for that by the religious leaders of his day. But he said, "I didn't come to heal those that are well, but those who are sick." That's mercy. So it's not characterized by a critical spirit. Other commentators, one says, "Be hard on yourself, but easy on the others." Another commentator by the name of Allen says, "Be slow to condemn and quick to commend." So let's be careful. Let's be merciful, not judgmental. Now, the merciful practice being merciful. In other words, mercy is love in action. Not just the way we feel, but it's love in action. Remember the parable of the Good Samaritan? We remember the Good Samaritan. Why? Because of his mercy. He wasn't a physician. He wasn't rich. I just read a comment last week, he was on his way to somewhere. We don't know where. But he was on a mission. But he was merciful. Now, in that same parable, we read about the Levite and the Pharisee who passed to the other side. They were mentioned because of their lack of mercy. So in other words, if you're merciful in your heart, on the inside, it'll show up on the outside in what you do. Merciful people are forgiving people. Notice Jesus' example on the cross. Remember what he said? "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." It wasn't because he was superior in forgiving, but he was loving. He forgave even before he was asked. So we have to ask ourselves, can we forgive if we know the person really isn't even sorry? Are we merciful? Now, Beatitude says, "Blessed are the merciful, for," the result, "they shall obtain mercy." Now let's look at the promise to the merciful. This is a consistent principle throughout the whole New Testament in the teaching of Jesus. Remember in studying physics that we talked about the equal and opposite reaction. Wherever there's an action, there's equal and opposite. So the same is true for mercy. Remember in the Lord's Prayer, "Father, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." And then in verse 15, Jesus said, "But if you do not forgive others, then your Father will not forgive your transgressions." Forgiveness, mercy. Blessed are the merciful, they shall obtain mercy. So it has a horizontal dimension on the human side. I don't know if you think about this, but we're likely to realize many times the faults we most sharply condemn are those which we're the most guilty of. Remember Jesus said, "Remove the beam out of your own eye before you condemn the mote which is in your brother's." So we see the reflection of ourselves in others. If we are kind, we're treated so. But we must never forget the vertical dimension. All of us are in need of God's mercy, not justice. If we received justice, we'd be so pitiful. We need God's mercy. In Matthew 18, verses 23 to 25, we read the parable of an unforgiving servant. This is a servant whose master called him, who owed 10,000 talents and demanded payment. And the servant fell on his knees and begged, and the master forgave him the entire amount. But what happened? This servant went out and called in his servants, demanded payment, and punished them if they couldn't. Finally, the master heard about it and called him and condemned him totally. And punished him terribly. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. That's the parable teaches us that. So we need to step into the circle of the merciful. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. I want to close by reading a prayer. I'm sure you've read this before. It's the prayer of St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there's hatred, let me bring love. Where there's offense, let me bring pardon. Where there's discord, let me bring union. Where there's error, let me bring truth. Where there's doubt, let me bring faith. Where there's despair, let me bring hope. Where there's darkness, let me bring your light. Where there's sadness, let me bring joy. O Master, let me not seek as much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it's in giving that one receives. It's in self-forgetting that one finds. It's in pardoning that one is pardoned. It's in dying that one is raised to eternal life. I think that kind of sums it up. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. The bliss of mercy. Thanks again for being with us. I hope that you've responded to this as I have, as I've studied it. And I pray that the Lord will help me to be merciful, to give me that mercy inside. Thank you for being with us this evening.